I'm in Max. You are listening to Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. I'm in Max. Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon.
Why, hello, and welcome to Season 25, Episode 16 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
I'm Pooja.
I'm Stork.
I'm Joey.
And I'm Kimmy.
And you may notice the screen looks a little different if you're watching this while we do this show live.
It is a takeover. It is the Exodus takeover of the Happy Jack's RPG Podcast.
Yes.
The Changeling debrief went so well and was well received, so we're going to try to start doing that with every campaign. So rather than a regular advice show episode, we're going to be talking about the campaign in general.
We'll give some advice too.
With a lot of advice.
And give some advice as well.
Yeah.
But first, if you'd like to email us, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. We're on the social medias. happyjacksrpg, all one word, on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and MeWe.
MeWe does not exist.
And what's the Brazilian one?
I don't know.
Is it Orchid?
We're not on anything else. Stop spreading out our audience through all these social medias that you don't maintain.
And
Mastodon's still under construction.
No, I looked at how to install that. I'm like, it's and if you'd like to email us, or no, I already did that one.
Yeah.
I don't have the pages in front of me, so I'm trying to do it from memory.
Yeah.
Oh, if you'd like to watch the show live, watch the show at happyjacks.org/live. That's happyjacks.org/live. We do the show at 7:03 p.m. Pacific time every Friday.
And we have a forum. If you go to
forgot about the forum.
happyjacksforum.com.
Yep.
Or happyjacks.org/forum.
No. happyjacksforum.com.
They both go to the same place. It's fine.
But use the one. So we can get our money's worth out of this domain.
$6 a year, man.
Right.
But yeah, you can go there. There's tons of conversation happening. We actually just added a play-by-post section, so you can go play games on there. There's also a find game section, so you can find people to play with online or wherever you want to play.
And don't be afraid. It's a very friendly forum.
And there's also like a play-by-post on the Discord, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So
I recently joined the Discord. It was
happyjacks.org/discord.
very happy to see all the interaction there.
Yeah, it's bumping. It's very busy.
Yep. All right, so as some of you may or may not know, on Sunday we completed session 13 of Exodus, our Mongoose Traveler 2nd Edition campaign.
And nobody died.
And no one died.
Well, no one
Spoilers.
important anyway.
Well, there's one angry sort of quasi-arachnid that died. Except for that, none.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
Yeah,
like-
so obviously, if you want to listen to the end of that campaign, skip
Spoilers!
this. Yeah, skip this for now, and then come back to this
Yeah,
later.
if you're listening to the debrief, we're going to assume that you have finished your
Right.
campaign or
Yeah, we
don't
don't-
care about spoilers.
We don't want to hear about that. No spoilers. I'm like, no, it says debrief on it.
It's supposed to, yeah.
So just pause this one now and go binge watch or binge listen, and then come back to us.
I'm just going to check. Yes, I did post it, yeah.
Oh Lord.
Well, there's a possibility, because
Yeah.
Oh boy.
it has happened. So, I think the first thing I'd like to do is kind of go around the room and have everyone talk about a little bit about their character, just kind of what their character was, what their kind of concept was, because Traveler's a little different than other games because it's a random character creation system. So you don't really know what you're going to get. You can go in; it's like life. You can go in with hopes and dreams and end
they
up
get dashed.
a scavenger.
Yep.
Dashed over and over and over
I'm
again.
sitting right here. Come on. Jeez.
Let's go around and just kind of a brief synopsis of the character.
So I was Riley O'Connor, and yeah, I went in and I made her like the great granddaughter of a character from another campaign I did. So I was badly Irish again, which is always fun. And
Is there any other kind of Irish though?
I'm sure there's people who are good at being Irish.
Okay.
In Ireland, there's
In
probably
Ireland?
plenty.
Yeah.
There's
I'm
goodly
sure
Irish.
there's people we know. We live in LA. There's probably a lot of great people who can do awesome Irish accents. Mine is not one of them, but it's better than it used to be. But yeah, it was really fun. Again, like I love going to Traveler because I try not to have any expectations. I did not expect to get cult leader as that was a surprise. I was open for anything, and then
that was in the expansion book.
Yeah.
I'm like, and these two are available as well.
yeah.
Well, remember, you were a truther, not a cult leader
Right.
first.
Right.
So
Yes.
that was...
Yeah. So for this, the truthers are like, they believe in like ancient artifacts and stuff like that have power and things like that. So
Real
yeah, it was really
tinfoil
fun.
hat types.
Yeah,
It's great.
total tinfoil hat types. So yeah, it was really fun, and it gave me a very different character to play than I've played before. Like Riley's kind of arc, like a lot of it was really like built in with the story, but I kind of saw her arc as being obsessed with like this artifact, and because she'd like lost her, she'd been in the military and then become a personal trainer and like a ballistic buns videos that she'd made.
Oh, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah,
Right.
she'd like
I didn't remember the
made
name.
a whole fortune on.
I'd forgotten about
yeah,
that.
but then she'd blown her whole fortune on buying this artifact that she thought would change the course of human history, which it kind of did it eventually.
Yeah.
I kind of saw her arc as being so obsessed with this, but then eventually being more like in favor of humanity, growing close to the team, and even though it wasn't like super close best friend buddy bonds, it was like, okay, like she was more willing to put them ahead of like this artifact, and kind of move in that direction and build a cult at the same time. But
I mean, like you do.
yeah, but it was more a journey from like being obsessed about this artifact to being more obsessed with like humanity and people. So it was fun.
I played Milo Hawkins, who was an ex-diplomat working with Exodus, and I really didn't have much of a plan going in once I built the character. I knew, because I'm me, I wanted to try to build something that was going to be more facey, because that's what I like to do, and in a system you don't know, kind of go with what you know.
Yeah.
And so I really didn't have a plan for him when we first started. I was like, let's just see what happens and see where he goes. And then I kind of decided about halfway through that he's rather opportunistic and wants to see how we can get ahead and how we can kind of work the system to get where he wants to get to. And ended up being the captain of a commandeered, legitimately salvaged ship.
Legitimate salvage.
That's the name of the ship now, right?
Yes.
It is
Yeah.
now. But yeah, that's kind of where his arc ended up. Was I kind of joked every opening of trying to herd the cats, but it was more just like trying to make sure they don't do anything stupid that's going to hurt his chances at moving forward. And I think I did that, surprisingly.
Yeah, you were very facey, your character.
Yeah, it was very good.
Despite the fact that, you can't really choose what you get in Traveler. So, I'm Stork. I played Vesta Samola. I failed out of a lot of different things, like you do in Traveler anyway. But I ended up with a lot of sort of combat-y stuff. And through the course of character gen, at one point, I think I saved Kimmy's life.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, cool, Kimmy and I will maybe be like combat veteran buds and stuff. And I actually said to myself, this is going to be a game where I try not to lock horns with Kimmy, because the last 2 games or 3 games, we ended up just locking horns on everything.
Yeah.
We just had differing opinions.
Yeah.
And so I said to myself, okay, I'm going to be Kimmy's friend this time around. But then she played this truther, and she was so nuts that I couldn't really back her up in a lot of ways. So I ended up...
You ended up doing it a lot, though. You
but
were like, you had my back a lot.
I did.
Yeah.
I kept trying up to a point where I'm like, no, she's going too far. I can't back this. But because we were like, we had this sort of backstory.
Yeah.
Again, that's one of the cool things about Travelers. You make all these connections with the characters. And the archetype I was playing with was, I was going to give him PTS. And I was trying to figure out a way to do PTS without it being all, night sweats and being Wolverine. It's boring. It's been done. And I finally remembered, oh yeah, he could be like Hawkeye Pierce.
I mean, no offense to Wolverine fans out
No.
there. We don't
Right.
want to get mobbed.
Yeah.
But
At me.
so I thought I'd do like a Hawkeye Pierce kind of thing, where he hides behind humor and he parties a lot, and and Hawkeye always walked around with a Hawaiian shirt and a martini in his hand, and yet he was a really good surgeon. But he was definitely his way of dealing with
The
the
stress,
horrors of
yeah.
war. So I thought, okay, I'll kind of do that, and he'll be kind of, hey, how's it going? Hey, until he comes into combat, it might be kind of a nice dichotomy. And I'm not sure I was able to pull that off so much, because the game's our first combat, I think I got 1 hit and was almost dead.
Yeah.
So
Though that led to like such a great, the outcome of that was so good that I can't even be mad.
that's true.
It led to me saving you, which was kind of another moment for us to bond. So that kind of...
But that was
Yeah.
my planned character arc, was sort of a PTS veteran who basically he took this job because he's out of the military, didn't get much for all the services, so he figured this is a cushy job. I'll just be the troubleshooter. I'll get my credits and I'll retire. It'll be great. So he really didn't have his heart in it at the start. So the arc was going to be this sort of Hawkeye type character who redeems himself at the end of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I was able to pull that off, but
Can I say, like, you said Hawkeye character,
A
and
bunch of times.
a lot of times, but like
You're playing the Avengers.
I was really thinking, like, you know, Avengers Hawkeye or like Kate Bishop Hawkeye,
Nope.
and then you were like, and then he's a great surgeon, and I was like, so with you right up until that moment.
It's an old show called MASH.
And
I guess I
figured
should have
that's
been
what
clear
it
about that.
Must have been.
I should be clear about that because there's probably a lot of people that are out of my generation listening to this who first idea of Hawkeye is
Not Hawkeye
Jeremy
Pierce.
Renner. Yeah.
I mean, not
You're-
necessarily Jeremy Renner either, but it was really funny because it was like, and he really deals with it through like womanizing and like, you know, playing everything off as a joke, and then you were like surgeon, and I was like, what?
I was with you, Stork.
I was with you, too.
Okay.
I've watched all of MASH a bunch of times, so.
So Pooja was playing a character named Shari Melnyk, and I really came into Traveler was my first exposure to the system completely. So I read the manual, like the whole thing, like the night before we started the campaign, like before we created characters.
Thank you for that.
She's the only one that was still fresh on the rules.
Yeah.
Well,
That's great.
I wasn't sure. Like, this was my first full campaign with Happy Jacks, so like, I was like, everyone's going to be so prepared. I need to be so prepared.
I thought the same thing too. My first game, I knew Savage Worlds backwards and forwards that first game. Like, oh, I did too much homework.
Yeah, exactly. So now that I am the meme, the person who actually is everyone.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't have a lot of like expectation of how this was going to go because obviously I'd read I was like, oh, it's all going to be the dice. Like I have no control over this. But the dice were in my favor, and I ended up being an intelligence agent my entire career.
Yeah. You never failed out once. In fact, you got
Yeah.
advanced, all kinds of stuff.
Exactly, and then
Got out lots of money.
the connection that we made, or I made with Joey's character, and us having gone to school together and having this whole like, you know, education bond was really cool. And then kind of like the spice I had thrown in was the psionic stuff, and like that being what made me leave the intelligence agency, and like and what got me my enemies and things like that. That was really interesting to me. So I was glad that we, when we came back around, we got to play with that.
Yeah,
And
that was a house rule I think Tappy originally came up with, which is once everyone's done with character creation, everyone rolls on the mishap table. And that's the reason you left your career and are now a player character rather than someone sitting on in a job someplace.
and it was an interesting thing that it was like I had kind of my own conspiracy thing going on,
Yeah.
but I was so on the down low about it, where you were so open about yours, Kimmy, and it was like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah.
This is so much fun.
Kimmy would tell anybody who would listen about her artifact. And even on the meme, I was like, I was never in the military. I don't know what you're talking about. Go
I was
away.
like, I can neither confirm or deny that I ever met that person.
Yep.
And the contacts from Intelligence Agent got to play a little bit, which was fun. So I felt like my character was more going for the, like, okay, this is my job, I'm going to do the thing, and, like, you know, going into it with that same drive that she had in her previous career, that it was like, no emotion, no, like, real connection, but this is the job. And then over the course of it, like, discovered that she not only had a bond to all these people that she was working with and really, like, cared about them, but also cared about humanity as a whole.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that, like, Shari was not the one to suggest sacrificing an entire sector if things didn't go great.
Joey.
It made the most sense with the information we had at the time.
But the idea that she came to see beings as having worth for themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, now one of the ways, because this is the second Exodus campaign. The first one kind of fell apart.
Yeah. Scheduling problems.
But the sort of the major conceit of this is that you all work for this organization called the Exodus Foundation, and the Exodus Foundation basically goes out to colonized worlds and helps protect them from the superpowers on Earth that basically have just rolled in once they discovered faster than light technology, because they all got there by generation ships. And once they discovered fast and light technology, they're kind of like, okay, this is our planet now. You can stay, but you can do what we say. And then off and on they went. And Exodus is sort of an organization set up to better the lives of these planets and help move them to a point where they can be more independent, or at least have a voice on Terra, which they didn't have that either. So that conceit worked really well this time, and it didn't work really well the last time. And I specifically came up with that, like, you're all members of a crew, and there's other NPCs on the crew, and there could be other PCs on the crew as well if people need to switch out or whatever. And I think the reason it worked out better this time than last time, I don't think the concept changed at all. I think we just had much better luck with scheduling.
Yeah.
This game than we did with that one.
I think also too that what we ended up with for our careers.
Yeah.
Because in the last campaign, Dave ended up rolling crazy. He ended up being like a duke or something.
I don't think that was that game.
Was it?
No, that was another Traveler game I ran.
Sorry.
Where he was like an archduke.
The one where he killed my goat?
That was a different campaign.
I'm sorry.
That was that's a whole entirely different campaign. That was in the Third Imperial.
No, I'm the one who owned the ship in that one. You're right. Okay, sorry, I got him confused.
Right. Well, you didn't own the ship, but you were like...
I owned like a big chunk of it,
Yes,
and I was like,
right.
yeah, I feel like, yeah, sorry. So I played like a...
debutante.
Yeah, I was Paris Hilton in space, basically.
Right.
And I had, there's a goat involved in another game. It's very, I don't
Allegedly.
know. Allegedly. Dave killed it. But I feel like,
what you're
like with the debutantes and I forget what all the other characters were.
Dave's character was almost totally useless, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. And
Had like no like applicable skills to anything.
anything. We ended up with this crew that just like,
Couldn't do anything.
yeah. And like didn't have a whole lot of reason to help the Exodus Foundation. Like, and I think part of that was our character choices, because I could have rolled a debutante that was like very, philanthropic or something like that, and that's just not what I really leaned into.
Right.
And I think I think this time we ended up with careers that lined up better with the intended kind of storyline, and also you did a great job of sending out a debrief ahead of time. So I think we were able to make, as we rolled and got different careers, we were able to make more applicable choices that benefited the campaign in the long run.
Yeah.
I don't know if I sent out a briefing for the first campaign or not. I don't recall, but I know that basically the structure of it didn't change at all. It remained almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
Now, did anyone have any sort of inkling what the storyline was going to be like in the first couple sessions?
Not at all.
Nope.
Neither did I. This is one of the things I want to mention. Just so you can kind of get a scope on how much I over-prepare games, I'm in the process of writing up this setting to publish, because there's a open license sort of thing that I can publish it through. I'm transferring stuff from my OneNote file for this into a word processor. I'm maybe about halfway through at this point. It's 40 pages long.
Oh my god.
Because I would sit down and say, I'm going to write about the Merchants Guild, and I'd just start writing. And
Yeah.
I'll write for hours.
That's cool.
And then the next thing you know, because there's a whole Merchants Guild
That we never
That we
met.
literally
never had any contact with whatsoever. I figured they're out there,
Yeah.
but
That would have been really helpful when we were looking for that ore.
Yeah, I'm glad I saw Pooja's
Probably,
face
yes.
right now, because like you were like, I wrote 40 pages about the Merchants Guild, and I was like, God, I don't remember them. And then
Right?
Pooja's face, I'm like, we didn't meet them. Okay, I don't feel bad. I'm not a terrible person.
Nope.
But I wrote because I didn't know where the game was going to go.
Right.
I didn't know the game was going to be about finding an elder ship until probably halfway through.
Wow.
I didn't even develop that concept until then. And what the thing that made that happen was that artifact that you came up with.
Oh,
and I'm like,
okay.
well, I want that to be an elder artifact. And then I remember, I don't know, many sessions in, I texted you and said, what do you think this thing does? I said, I have no idea. To me, it's just a statue.
Yeah.
It's like a piece of art.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's going to be more than that. So I came up with what it was. And from that sprung a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
But the original... Now, one of the conceits I wanted to sort of put forth in the game, or one of the concepts I wanted to put forth, was that, yes, there was this very ancient sapient species out there that was extremely powerful, probably ruled the entire galaxy, and was super advanced. And I tried to give you guys little clues to that, and I'm curious if anyone picked up on those clues. One of the problems was we didn't have anyone in the party who was a science person.
True
So,
enough.
so I had to use two crows to like give you guys these little bits and pieces of information.
Yeah.
But there were a little bit of hints.
Yeah. Two Crows was our NPC who was the doctor on the ship.
Yeah. And also like
And also the like
xenobiologist.
substitute captain.
Yeah.
And
It's funny because I Stork as a person picked up on a bunch of these things. Where you're talking about how the DNA in the crystal squirrels,
There
and
you
the
go.
DNA in the apes was the same. How the apes would get together and have, but my character wouldn't have put those two together or couldn't say anything because he didn't really have any of that kind of stuff. But I remember you dropping those hints, and I remember, again, it's this legacy left over from past terraforming or from past occupation of whatever these forerunners were.
yeah. Well, I mean, once we got to like, I think when it really all came to a head was when we explored the derelict ship that turned out not to be so derelict. And it's like, oh, look, all these races were on here. And it's like, that explains specifically the lurkers, but also some of these other, like, markers that were going across species.
Right.
But before then, it wasn't something we kind of, like, early on, we had talked a lot about how the lurkers, like, the ancients were experimenting on them. They had done stuff. But because it didn't necessarily, like, factor into what we were doing at the time,
Yeah.
I don't think we really seized.
I remember sort of putting these things together, but it really wasn't. We didn't know what to do on that information.
Yeah,
So we would
exactly.
send it off to the wolf and wait for more orders.
Right.
And that's kind of the conceit of what we were doing, which is you guys are out here working for this corporation. We're not really supposed to be making big decisions. We're just we're kind of following this orders, go out there, and then we wait for like, well, here's what we found. What do you want us to do about it?
That's kind of a concept that I want to talk about as well, and that is Milo took it upon himself to be the person to send the reports back to the Exodus Foundation. And I realized you guys are at this point, especially when you were way up where the rock concert was happening on the rock concert planet, you were at that point probably 4-5 months away by travel or communication from the Exodus Foundation.
There's no way we can.
You're on your own.
Yeah.
And one of the things I realized about the setting is kind of everyone's on their own.
Yeah.
You can't micromanage. If you send someone out in a starship to another star system, your chances of micromanaging them are gone. Because now it's at least a week before you can get a message back and forth. So that's one of the things I wanted to try. I kind of tried to steer you guys to the point. I don't know how successful I was, to the point where it's like, no, you're trusted to make your own decisions. Don't go firing on naval ships or anything. But short of that,
Legitimate salvage.
The stealing.
I didn't say anything about stealing.
Yeah.
But I wanted you guys to get that sense of autonomy where, you're and they're going to run cover for you as long as you didn't like do something malicious. They've got people in place to make sure to run cover and give you legal protection or whatever it
I would
needs to
have
happen.
loved to have had that in our briefing when it was sent to us originally.
Well, yeah, I didn't realize that was going to be a problem until around until you got to the concert planet.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that
Caliban.
about the system that it took me a long time to get my head around was the speed of communication or lack of speed.
Because every time I thought, I understand it, like, oh no, it's at least 3 times longer than I actually think it is.
Exactly. So that, and also what kind of power like Exodus had,
Right.
and what kind of trust they had in us. Like, it was just a slow thing to develop, I think, amongst the group.
Because I think if we'd known that information and gotten it really hammered in, I think what Milo would have done instead of sending reports is write the reports and held them, and also been, because he had a decent advocate, like, how can I make sure we don't get in trouble for this?
Right.
And that would have been more of his role, I think, instead of just writing the reports.
Okay.
And there were a few times that you did that, and it was amazing.
Thank you.
Now as far as when the sort of what the final story arc was going to be, that basically all happened back in the Terran system, in the deep space research stations. You guys recall? That's where where they were working on the nanobots, and literally it was like a session before that I decided this is the story we're going to start telling.
Nice.
I did not know, because when I made everything, it's like, okay, here's the Merchants Guild. Here, there's pirates. Did you know there was pirates? There's pirates too.
Aw.
But I had and I had a whole bunch of different corporations. I had a bunch of like news and information organizations that existed. Oh, there's tons of stuff that I came up with, and I would throw things in occasionally, you know, to get. But almost every organization mentioned in those little news briefings you guys got had at least 2 or 3 paragraphs of stuff about them that I'd written.
Nice.
At the point. And almost none of it came to light. But we had talked outside about the fact when the game started, it really felt kind of sandboxy. Because I'd done all this stuff and then just put you guys in it, and I was basically kind of waiting to see what was either going to be interesting or where these series of disparate events would sort of meet together and give me sort of a story ending and an ending in mind, because I did not start the campaign with an ending in mind,
Right.
which according to some people you should always do.
No.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
who
it was
knows?
fun to explore for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until, I think, the end of our time on Caliban, maybe. There was a point where I felt like, I was like, okay, what are we doing?
Right.
See, yeah, at that point, I thought we were getting into espionage because I had chomped on that hook so bad about Arthur Pena and the guy
Right.
boiling hydrogen. Like, I was not like a vice grip on that. Like, that is where we're going. I'm very excited about this. And then the lab exploded with the nanobots and the quantum bots. I'm like, oh,
Quantum.
bigger issue. We'll
Right.
get back to that. We'll put a pin in that.
Still an unresolved plot.
Oh, I know.
No, I know. That's actually something I wanted to ask you about, but maybe you don't want to talk about it, but because it could be a plot for something else later. Which is, I mean, somebody had gotten a hold of the quantum bots before somewhere,
Right.
and was working with them, and we still don't know who that was.
Well, you guys had nailed it. It was the guy from it was Arthur Pena, and I
Yeah.
can't remember the name of the company he worked for.
Yeah.
But it was the company that had the terraforming contract for Caliban. And basically, the backstory of it was that they had done. There had been another company that had done. The way I see it is terraforming is almost like building highways. If it's not a public work and it's a for-profit venture, that company that's going to make it is going to go out of business, because terraforming is just not that profitable.
Oh, it's very aliens, right? And we manufacture those, by the way. They're very classified. That's that whole speech that Bert gives them about the planet.
Right. So this corporation had terraformed Mars, and then went belly up, because they tried to basically go into land speculation. But now there's a whole planet's worth of land. Guess what happens to the price of land? So then this new company formed out of the ashes of that company and terraformed like Titan, which is around Saturn or something, and basically made a breathable atmosphere ice world.
That's awesome.
Guess how profitable that one's going to
Yeah.
be.
Right.
So basically, but they had a lot of backing. So when Caliban was found, they realized this is a planet because it's already got all the stuff you need to have a breathable atmosphere. It just doesn't have the breathable atmosphere, right? But it's going to have the magnetosphere and all the stuff it needs. So this was basically like their last ditch effort to be able to turn a profit on terraforming, because this was going to be a fairly easy job for them. This basically would have, and once that happened and the terraforming had to stop, that would have ruined the company. And they were already what were they called? Boiling Hydrogen, the band. They were already trying to get it to stop anyway, but they didn't know why, because you guys had discovered that the corporation that was working on it had already knew these things existed, and they were hiding the fact.
Yeah.
But the crystal squirrels and
Not the crystal squirrels, but the
sentient
insects.
Yeah, I think it's cool that you did all that backstory, because I think even though we didn't necessarily know what direction to go, it never felt like there wasn't a direction, and it always felt like everything was super fleshed out and ready to go. Like wherever we went, it was ready.
the fact that you had anagrams for everything
Yeah.
said something.
Yeah.
Like, Ustas Navy. I'm like, whoa, he's got this all
yeah.
worked out. And then you had like another one, the Legion of Xenobiologists, and there was another one.
The International Association of Xenobiologists.
Yes. So I
Or the
think
Association of International Xenobiologists.
yeah.
That war rages on centuries into the future.
Yeah. So I think that I think that was the cool part of it. Like, like it never felt like we hit the edges of the sandbox while we were playing. It felt like there was always more to go the farther we went in one direction.
Even if you got outside of explored space,
Yeah.
there were aliens.
Yeah.
There was alien civilizations.
2 of them.
almost butting up against Terran space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't. I thought because I developed both of them. The Tobantu had already been developed, and I had also developed the Chictal, I think.
Yeah.
And there, because I didn't know if you guys were going to say, "Hey, you know what? Let's go." Because I was terrified you guys were going to go. Let's go to Elder Star Alpha and let's find out what's really going on down there, because that's where these nanobots came from. And at one point, I figured that's the direction you're going to go. So I better make up the alien species that's basically sort of just beyond Chinese space.
That was actually my hardest thing with Riley, was to not just do stuff like that, to like not be like, well, let's go to whatever Alpha,
Elder Star
Elder Star
Alpha.
Alpha. Like that, I could like. There were times where I was like, okay, this is what she'd probably want to do, but like balancing that with that doesn't make sense with what we're doing in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's her obsession, not like the collaborative storytelling we're doing it together. And like trying to balance, like, no, okay, I can see her also thinking that this was important and wanting to meet this person.
Which actually is a really good example of like positive metagaming.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think a lot of people need to kind of embrace a bit more, where, well, my character wouldn't do that, my character did this. Okay, great, but if your character does that, then you're not going to be part of the party. Like, think about how you can keep the party cohesive while still being your character. Mm-hmm. And that's a good way of looking at that.
Mm-hmm.
And it is one thing, like, especially when you're saying, like, oh, but she'd also care about this.
Yeah.
That I think it's a trap that we often fall into with our characters, that, like, we get this one idea of how they are in our minds, and it makes them one-note characters. And whereas thinking about, like, what other motivations they have or what other factors might influence them to change their mind, or what, like, why would they go against their natural instincts to do something, can create a more fleshed out and interesting character to play that also has a great side benefit of, like, you not being completely disruptive to the party as a whole.
Right.
Well, it's also an interesting note, I think, for people that are GMing out there. And Stu did this with the vampire game with my character, which is, if you have a character that has an interesting backstory, take elements from that and bring them to the forefront and have that featured in the party. So he mined your story and kind of made it the central point for all of us. Because you clearly your artifact was featured prominently in our entire adventure here. And
Rip alien artifacts.
Right, and that's a great idea. So you've got an interesting character. You have no idea of really what you're going to do. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take that. I'm going to work with this, and then it made your character much more interesting, and it gave them something to do. And the rest of us were sort of along for the ride. Like, really, that thing's real? it actually does talk to aliens? Oh, well, that changes everything.
Yeah. Stu does a really good job at that too. Like, it was sort of like you were baking a cake with things from all of us. Like, there was like a war for your and my characters to like be good at that. The psionics was mixed in. Like, we needed a talker, and definitely like you were like communicating between all these different. So it was like.
Was that on purpose, Stu?
Yes. Yes. Well, yeah. As things evolve, I try to make sure that if characters don't look like they're having something to do, I try to make sure that never happened. But if it is looking that way, I try to put in story elements that are going to be able to feature that character. Hopefully, a lot of times, I mean, they don't grab that spotlight, but at least offer it. You know what I mean? But now, when the campaign got to the point where I realized, okay, there's going to be a derelict spacecraft with a living elder on it, the party's going to die. There's no way they're going to survive this. That's when I'm like, I need to like put a secret, like super secret stealth ship or something somewhere that they have an opportunity to steal somehow, because this old rickety yacht they've got isn't going to. It's not gonna help.
With the
I wondered why you
rebadged
gave that to
hull.
us. I kind of figured why. I was like, oh.
It was basically me leveling you up.
And the same with the bullets at the end too. It's like, here, you need these. I'm like,
Well, I happened to look at the ACR does 3d6 damage.
Yeah.
And the armor that you're wearing is like 21 or 22 DR. So you can shoot yourself in the head with that gun all day long and never hurt yourself.
right.
Wow. Yeah.
And if you can do that, what's the guy who's like tech level 16 going to do in his armor?
Right.
And the other, like, and that was a little fun. The way you integrated it too was really fun, because obviously we didn't have very many combats in that campaign. It was probably 3-4 total if you include the last one. And
If that. There were very few. But
yeah,
I think
because
we're
we had
gonna
the
have a great
original
war against
lurkers.
crystal squirrels.
Technically, I think we just ran away. We had the original lurkers, and then lurker redux, security bots,
Oh, that's right.
and yeah, so like 4.
Yeah.
With the last combat, and so it
I
was
rolled
like
against the crystal squirrels too. I lost. I remember I got a hole in my suit.
Right.
you just sat there and watched it eat a hole. in your suit.
I was going to communicate with it. It was
That's
so
right, you were.
bonding.
Yeah. Oh, it's so cute. And
So cute. It's like the cartoon moment. We're like, look at it, and bite your ear.
But the way I really like the way you integrated it, where you were like had an NPC that was like taking stock of everything and being like, look, you really want to use this. That was here all along, but you've never thought about.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he was judgy.
and,
Yeah.
and in all honesty, those bullets don't exist in the main books.
No,
so
they
it didn't
don't.
even occur to me to ask that there might be something. I'm like, well,
I
this
don't
is
even
what we
think,
have.
I don't even think they exist in the central supply
So
catalog.
he made them up and then handed them to me.
Yeah.
So, oh, okay.
Well, I was trying to equip you guys to be able to at least have a measure of success.
Well, it worked. Spoilers, 1 hit down.
Yeah. One really good damage hit.
It was
Who
so
expected
good.
that from the store?
Storm's
Got me
one
really-
good roll the entire game. It was perfect.
Yeah, it's the best.
It was like
Yeah.
Pop.
I really like how you like designed all the different alien races and like how they worked together in the past with the elders kind of being in charge and telepathically like controlling the others, and how they each had their role that they were like good at.
Right.
And then you did a great job of then like moving that forward millennia later. Like, what would these disparate races do? Like, how would they like claim ownership of their civilizations again after being freed or abandoned, and then like how would that develop? So you did a great job with that too, and like it was very believable with the way like there was some who'd completely lost like who they had been, and we have no idea. We never talked to them too much about it. They had like hints that they still remembered the masters,
Right.
but not like a ton. And then there were races who very clearly remembered that this was part of their history, even if they didn't have a lot of fact. It had been something that had almost gone into myth,
Right.
which I thought was a really
And
fascinating.
it would. I mean, you're talking
Yeah.
almost a million years.
Yeah. So I thought that was a really fascinating piece of that, and a cool way to integrate that into the campaign without giving us allies who knew everything about the bad guy.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I tried to the one NPC that ended up kind of overusing ended up being Two Crows.
Yes.
Yes.
Because a lot of the adventure really there was a lot of foreshadowing going on for a whole bunch of different possible story arcs. But what ended up being the relevant foreshadowing was the genetic stuff with the lurkers and with the
Insects.
the termites or whatever, and being able, but no one in the party had the skill to be able to draw the line between, hey, this little segment of DNA in this bug happens to also be in this lurker. What's the chance of that happening randomly? Things like that. And so I ended up having to kind of rely on that NPC to be able to give you guys plot information.
I don't mind that at all, though, because in
That's
a lot
what
of ways,
that's what I was going to ask.
we're flailing in the dark, and you've done this before in games too with burst staff and such. And sometimes it's nice to have an NPC that clarifies stuff for us, and especially if we didn't have that skill set.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
like had Joey made a science roll, had he had a science, you could have told us that. But since none of us had that skill, you had to figure out a way to give us that information, and so I had no problem with an NPC sharing that information with us at all. It makes perfect sense.
I also felt like Two Crows was part of the party.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
he really
Like-
was.
He was more one of us, like a PC almost, than he was an NPC. In my mind.
What do you think it was that changed that in your head?
Well,
The reason I ask is because GMs are out there going, yeah, I really want to know why.
well, part of it is that he had a very fleshed out personality. The number of interactions that we had with him over such a long period of the campaign, because oftentimes we'll hit an NPC and we may spend like 2 or 3, like you may talk to them 2 or 3 times during the entire campaign. Two Crows was with us that whole time.
Right.
He had a very distinct personality, and he also, because he was giving us relevant information to what we were doing, and he had a skill set that we didn't have and needed to go to him for.
Okay.
Maybe because he was actually rolled up as a player character originally, because it didn't Adam.
Yeah,
It was
Adam's
a
NPC.
purchased NPC.
Okay.
I think something that made it really work too is that he was a passive character. Like, we would go to him and say, "Hey, we have this thing, test it." So it wasn't like he was like this figure coming out when you needed to give us information that was just handing you information that you
Deus
were
Ex Machina.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It was like, hey, like we're smart enough to collect samples. We can't do the test, but we're smart enough to kill the thing and take it back to our doctor, and then then he would be able to run tests on it. So he was working cooperatively with us to get the information, which I think was important and why it wasn't necessarily like a bird staff. That's our 5e campaign from forever ago, who was kind of like our quest giver.
4E.
4E, yeah.
Yeah.
Forever ago, back in
D&D
the
4th
days.
edition.
See what
Yeah.
you did there.
Yes. And he was like, if you play WoW, like, you run up and there's the question mark, and you turn in the information, and you get the information you need for the next step. And birds, Two Crows, I have a bird thing going on. Was like the next, I feel like it's like the next iteration of that, where we get information, but it's because of action we've taken, and because we're asking and looking for that information specifically, usually.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think the trick for him becoming our touchstone and us remembering him is because he more than once had relevant information for us. It wasn't just a one-off. And because he was working so long, first of all, he healed us, me,
Right.
more than once, and you,
me.
and he had all this science stuff. So he like every other episode had something important to help us with, and so we ended up just relying on him because that's by the nature of what we were doing, he had the relevant information and the relevant skill set.
And sometimes he didn't. There were times where we went and, nope, sorry, I can't
do that.
You
It's
can't do this.
Why would
Yeah.
you think I could do this? Do you not understand
Yeah.
science? And
Or
we're
no-
like, no.
So I think it's also too, like, there were times where we, like, another party member, like, would not get a roll right and we wouldn't be able to do something. So he's also sometimes is like, that's not a thing. Like, that's not how that works at all.
Okay.
It is it is a mystery for GMs about the NPCs that players just glom onto. It's like you'll spend all this time developing the backstory for the bartender, and they glom onto the one-armed blacksmith down the street for whatever reason that you just made up on the fly for whatever reason. And you're like, I spent all this time on the bartender. What's wrong with you people? So all I can say is that the blacksmith had much more interesting information than the bartender did. So we glommed onto him.
And part of it too is like I think one thing that maybe would be helpful for people to keep in mind is that if your players show like a real interest in somebody, I mean, it hurts, but like, just abandon whatever else, flesh out the person that they care about, and make them someone more important. Like, take somebody, like if you have a future NPC or something like that they haven't been introduced to, or you could, like, information that another NPC that you cared about more originally would have had, give it to the one that they actually have a connection with.
Which is exactly what you did in your one shot.
I tried.
You did.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I had all these other people I liked better.
Exactly what happened. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Kimmy hit the nail on the head. I think it's the fact that he had such a developed personality, and I think it's the fact that he filled in the role that we needed in the party. And also, the biggest one I think you brought up was the fact that we went to him with information. We went to him for questions. It was, hey, we want you to run this test. It was our idea. It was always our, not to use this word, but our agency.
Right.
And he was just basically the make science button.
Right.
On top of that, he had a name
gonna
that none
say
of us
that.
could forget.
True enough.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. Anything? Anyone else? Any comments or anything about that anyone want to bring up, or any lessons learned?
So, I think there's still a plot hole or two that I'm still trying to figure out. Okay, so where did they get the quantum bots that they originally worked with?
Elder Star Alpha. Well, every nation had found some sort of derelict of the Elders.
Okay, new
in
information.
In Ustas space, it was the one you guys visited, but all of the other, I mean, they were a galactic-wide civilization, and they got obliterated by their own weapon, and so there's derelict ships just floating around.
With quantum bots just waiting to...
Sure, yeah.
Right.
And why then when we dropped off what was left of the guitar player, they said, "Oh, you got another one." They said that they had dealt with these quantum bots before. That's just why they had.
Yeah, the station was set up. Those deep space research stations were set up specifically to try to deal with the quantum bots, which were found on Elder Star Alpha. Because
Interesting.
Elder Star Alpha
Okay.
is, it's not even, I don't even know if you would technically call it like a gray dwarf, but there was a single planet and a star in this system. The Elders came in, launched their quantum bots at it to kill did I even mention the hydroids?
Nope. Nope.
Okay, this whole thing happened because another species, a hydrogen-breathing species, invaded the galaxy about 1 million years ago, and were more technologically superior than the Elders,
Completely news to us.
and they had to figure out some way to stop them, and the only thing they could come up with was this ultimate weapon.
See?
This is like mind-blowing shit right now.
Right? Right? This is why I'm asking
So-
these questions. I was like,
But
I
that
think there's some holes in
explains,
our info
like-
here.
That explains a lot. Like, where it was like, because I wondered, when we were playing, I actually thought it was the Elders warring against each other.
That's what I thought too. That was interfighting.
And it was like a Hiroshima type situation, except like if Hiroshima like obliterated the galaxy.
No, they literally were trying to wipe out this other slightly technologically superior species, because they didn't want them to exist, because they were the most evolved species and they were the first species to evolve spaceflight in this galaxy, and they figured it was this whole galaxy was their destiny. That's why they felt it was perfectly fine to go along to other species and genetically modify them and turn them into servitor species.
So Elderfest Destiny.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
man.
That was
Okay,
I was
so-
trying, and you beat me to the next one. I have a question though.
Yes.
So, alien races are not really a thing in Traveler's setting. Correct?
Yes, they are. They are.
They are?
They
Okay.
are. They're usually very far away, though.
Right.
Most of the default setting is the Third Imperium. The Third Imperium is huge,
Yeah.
and that is like this, 20,000-year-old human civilization. But all of those humans didn't all evolve on Earth. They had been taken from Sol and put on Volani and the other planets, and evolved slightly separately. But they're all basically genetically human. But if you go farther away outside of the Imperium, you get the Vargr, which are the
That's the cat people?
that's the dog. That's dog people.
Yeah. They're cat people and dog people in the main book.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And insect
Like-
people.
And
I
well, the
guess-
cat people are the Aslan.
Yeah.
Right. Right. That's how can we forget?
And then there's the Hivers,
That's
which
right. I
are.
remember that now.
Yeah.
Okay. But
But I mean, there's very few adventures that ever even touch on it. It's all about human politics. for the
right.
most part.
So, how did it feel like coming up with these races that are not at all involved in Traveler as a GM? And did you hesitate about that? Like, what were some of your thoughts on developing completely new things versus using the things that were already involved?
Well, I
in the
didn't want to
system?
use anything that had existed before.
Okay.
Because I didn't. First off, I didn't think any of them were suited for sort of the storyline, and all of the species I came up with. I first came up with what was their purpose under the Elders, because however they had been evolving before was going to take a left turn once the Elders decided that they could be useful. So I started with that, and then what sort of position they were left in when the Elders left. Because when the Elders decided to get out of town, they're like, okay, everyone, we're leaving now, like right now, because this whole galaxy is going to turn into a big slurry of sludge.
Yeah.
And then they left. But they actually left stuff here to clean it up, intending to return.
Oh.
There's technologies they left to basically try to clean up interstellar space to detect and destroy any nanobots that were stray. So their hope was that they could get it to the point where they're only existing in certain systems where they're all being held in by gravity wells, and in that case it'd be safe to return.
Got it.
So
Okay.
I had a question sort of along that. Now, the one alien race we met was a servitor race of the Elders.
The Devonta.
But there was another alien race that we didn't that they mentioned.
yeah.
What was their?
they were engineers, but they were servitors of the.
Okay.
There's no except for humans. There's no species that wasn't a servitor species.
Okay.
Wait,
I mean, there might be. But
So they replaced the T'Chall with the monkeys?
no, the monkeys were more like mechanics.
Okay.
These were like designers.
Okay.
These were like the people who were like developing new technology and stuff like that to a certain extent. They would use them to sort of improve on stuff that they were coming up with, that elders were coming up with, because the elders obviously didn't want any of these other species to have access to technology that could potentially become superior technology. Because they wanted to keep them all in one. There was also one species that you could have found, but you didn't. And I think I may have mentioned the fact that there was on Caliban, I think it was a binary star system, if I recall correctly.
Maybe
There was a closer planet. And I don't know if I got distracted or if I didn't send you guys or had mentioned it and you guys, I mean, you had other problems at that point because you've got a bioweapon you're dealing with. But there were basically uplifted Neanderthals on that second planet living there as primitives.
Yeah.
Oh.
And they had been an uplifted species as
I don't remember any.
No, you wouldn't have.
Yeah.
The only thing I may have mentioned is, oh, and by the way, there's one more planet sort of
In
closer.
this system.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't remember, but I had developed that early on, and that would have also thrown you guys another little sort of bone as to
Yeah.
how the Elder Society, had been organized, because they would have been basically Neanderthals, but more intelligent, and I'm trying to remember what else I gave them. They ended up becoming sort of like archivists and historians.
Yeah, I was going
more
to say
than
maybe they
anything
had
else.
pictographs and murals that sort of described, or an oral history that would have described what the elders did and who they were, because
very well
we
could have.
weren't able to get any of that out of the
Yeah,
monkeys
because
or anything else.
the Tabantu didn't have. I mean, they had their legends and they had like a lot of practical information.
Right.
But in terms of the kind of way that the elders were,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Myth.
everything was a need to know
Yeah.
Yeah.
with them.
Some people in the chat room are asking kind of how did we feel about the system, and we felt like gaining skills and stuff like that, and how did that kind of factor into the story?
Well, we did a lot of things wrong, by the way. We broke a bunch of rules in places, and we figured stuff out halfway through doing it, like, oops. We need to keep better track of leveling up. I think that we all leveled up wrong at one point, and then we figured out what we had to do.
Well, there's not really leveling.
Right, but
well,
we
but advancing skills.
yeah,
Yes.
advancing
Yes.
skills, exactly.
I think that's an important distinction to make, though.
Though part of it is that besides the fact that like it's a little bit of a complicated system to do that, but like once we figured it out, it made sense. But during the course of a campaign like ours, we didn't have a lot of travel time. Like
No.
we were going to places that were pretty close together, and then a lot of our like, you know, and then we would deal with something for a long
a
period
couple
of
of
time
days.
in one place.
But really, it wasn't. It was only a couple of days. We did 2 weeks, and we'd be there for like 3 or 4 days,
Exactly.
and then we'd 2 weeks someplace else.
But that's the thing is like when leveling up a skill to get anything in one skill, you need 8 weeks. And then the next level is 16 weeks, and the next level is 24 weeks, and because of how our campaign ran, we maybe leveled up like 3 skills total across.
Maybe.
Like, yeah.
And I could totally see in a normal campaign where people have slower ships, that you could easily get 24 weeks in 2 or 3
Now,
jumps.
I did kind of shave off how much time it takes, because you're supposed to roll 2d6 minus something or 1d6 plus something to determine how many days you're in jump space. I just made it 7 days.
Yeah.
We were doing combat wrong up until the end. We had to, so you have to add the bonuses from overrolls. You have to take your minuses and your pluses for whatever skill sets you have. You also have to factor in range. We weren't doing any of that up until the end when we finally said
range almost never mattered.
I was
It
about to
never-
say range
We were
didn't.
always really close.
When we were at the extent, I remember like a couple of times it was like, oh, I'm that far away, like it's going to cause me a penalty, and we would just hold or do something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So range didn't come into
Right.
play for us very much.
Right, and the lurkers would only attack at close distance. They close up.
Right.
So at some point, range was actually a problem. It was like,
Yeah.
I got to drop my rifle and have.
But
pull out
we
something.
kept forgetting the fact that you add your 2-hit die roll effect to your damage
So
until the last second.
I think the
In fact,
system is
halfway through the last
That's what I was trying to say.
But when we have 4 combats, it's not exactly like
Right, yeah.
it was like majorly impactful to the campaign.
Right.
The one thing like about this system that I did want to say was that besides as soon as we got that new jump drive in our old grabby ship, we were faster than the speed of communication.
Yes.
It was such a weird dynamic. From then on, it was very strange.
But that's kind of Traveler anyway. Whether you're always so far away from communication, because it is kind of a hard science fiction game. It's not necessarily space sorcery like Star Wars or anything. It's much more computers and speed of light, and you're limited by that.
See, I think that frees us up so much, and that's one of the things I really love about Traveler. Is because can you imagine if we were like having the super fast communication, we would have to ask all the time. Because it gives you that freedom, like, and I think that was part of why it took us a while to get used to that. Because we kind of were in that, oh yeah, we have to ask our superior officers, and it's like, no, like you don't, because it'll be forever if you do that.
Right.
So it kind of at the same time it limits your choices. It also frees you up to make more choices than I think we would have been able to in a speed of light communication type setting, or I guess faster than light or whatever.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I've always loved about Traveler, even though.
It's a pain in the neck.
It can be a pain, yeah. But it's the same sort of thing, like when you're, in a modern setting and everybody can text each other versus like, oh no, it's
Letter writing.
in the 90s, so too bad, you have to find a payphone and stuff like that. It's like that.
Or it's the 1800s and you have to write a letter.
Yeah, something like that.
Go find a payphone and page someone.
Yeah, exactly.
The trick about Traveler is to remember that it's still a pretty gritty, and I mean by atmosphere, not necessarily dice mechanics, system in that it's not Star Trek. It's not slick and streamlined, and things happen instantaneously. It's much more Firefly, which we're pretty sure is actually the base of Firefly.
Oh, yeah.
But it's much more, ships still have water cooling, and space suits can get holes and you can die, and you still have to in space there's recoil and it will make you fly off. I mean, gravity does, all of that stuff still applies. So it's much more real than I think we tend to think of it in science fiction games.
Yeah.
Usually we like I'll just use the sensors. No, there aren't sensors. You actually have to ping for radar, and you have to listen for sounds. There's no big sensor button that gives you all the information on a planet. It's not that type of game.
Now, the one challenge, getting back to communications, for the GM, in order to be fair, you need to keep track of, if the bad guys are communicating with their bosses, you need to keep track of how long that's taking as well, because
that's a good
they need to
point.
work under the same constraints. And it's real easy to forget that and say, oh, this would be the plot appropriate moment for this to happen, but wait, it's only been 2 days. The bad guys' bosses haven't even gotten the message yet.
Right, yeah.
So that they can't have sent the hitmen yet.
Yeah. With me and the leveling or increasing skills thing, I get really excited about whatever's happening in the moment. So I have so many weeks of training and not enough in any of it because I kept switching.
Oh, I want to do vaccines.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to do engineering.
Well, and I kind of see that as Riley's character, like, oh, I just got a new tablet. I'm going to spend the next few weeks doing Ancient after, I've been on Gunnery for almost enough time to get it.
Right.
It's like,
Sorry.
no.
I feel my real life self has been really called out right now. Why must you attack me?
I
like
know.
this?
I'm the same way. It's fine.
I-
But, yeah.
But Joey, what did you?
yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, kind of an overall rule that we kind of talk about sometimes, and especially in a crunchy game like Traveler, if the rules get in the way of the fun, alter the rules.
Plus a
If
rule.
if the rule isn't working for your game, make it different.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what we did eventually. And we were instead of spending time to look up the rule, just make it up on the fly, and that's the rule for now. And if we look it up later, great. If not, that's the way it is. And I think that worked well for us.
Yeah. I mean, and I would never have used the space combat rules with you guys, because if you notice, you never really got any
Right.
space combats
Yeah.
at all. First off,
I actually didn't want to, because I know what a pain in the ass it is.
it's a I've never used the space combat system in 2nd edition. I don't know if I ever used it in 1st edition, but I always just try to let the players know that space combat's super scary because you're in this little tiny thin metal bubble out in the void of space. And if something goes wrong,
It's actually kind of boring, too. It's a lot of putting down miniatures and moving stuff around and left and right.
well,
and text and distances.
the newer version is way more
Roleplay.
well, not role play, but what's the word I'm thinking of? When something isn't
Efficient?
No.
No.
I can't think of the word. It is. It's basically you roll a couple dice and kind of determine what happens, and you roll some more dice and determine what happens.
Streamlined.
Oh, so it's very D&D.
No, that's what I'm thinking
While
of.
you're thinking about that,
Like combat in PBTA.
Okay.
If you had to describe that, it would
Narrative.
be narrative. But there's another word.
Okay.
But narrative works.
Okay.
Player driven?
I kept forgetting that in second edition
Storytelling.
Traveler, there's sort of a sliding success scale. Like you could do 4+ or 6+ or 7+. I kept thinking it was always 8 was a success, but I remember towards
They
the end of the
changed
game,
that, yeah.
they changed that, and I forgot. It's a little chart, sort of hidden away in between chapters.
Like
there.
four hires routine.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I kept stressing,
Or easy.
I kept thinking, oh my God, we're failing all our rolls. But then I realized that you were using that chart.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is a routine thing. Because I kept saying to myself, why is he making his roll for these routine things? Why is he making his roll for because one of the rules that we'd have was if the players have enough time to do something, just have them do it.
Right.
Don't have them roll. I kept having you roll. I kept going, why is he doing this to us? I mean, I get it. If you fail,
Especially-
interesting things can happen.
It could be so fun.
Especially if you're plotting your jump space thing.
Yeah. Or if you're
'Cause
trying to
I
park
will
the
never
ship.
not let people roll that. I
Yeah.
will never not.
I was terrified when I realized that was me every time. I was like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
If I get a critical failure, it's a missed jump. And then you roll one die, and you look at like on the hex map of the star system where they started out, and you roll one die, and that's the direction, and then you roll one more die, and that's the distance, and that's where you end up. And I've always loved that.
That's very exciting.
Because I will put an alien space Hulk in that.
And
that
that's
hex.
and that level of randomness is so much fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Well,
also
yes and
like
no,
how
because-
memey it is. That,
because
like
I-
your pilot can't park.
I've had it happen before where you blink into someplace and you're out of fuel and there's no place to refuel and the game's kind of over.
That's a sucky GM.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to find something.
That's a sucky GM because that's a TPK over one roll.
A passive. Yeah, that's lame. I think I had something to say and I forgot what it was now.
I would like to know like what. Oh,
Sorry, I
go ahead.
remember. I also think the way you set up the whole setting also kind of like edged us away from space combat. Because one, we're supposed to work for this philanthropic, helpful, thing.
You're not a military organization.
Yeah, we're not a military organization. Then we stole this very, very good military ship that we did not want anybody to notice we had. So it's like, if we obliterate everything around here, they're probably going to find evidence that it was us. Maybe we'll just hide and sneak through here quietly.
Right.
So I think both those like story elements also lent us to not really want to do space combat for reasons completely other than it was mechanically annoying.
Oh, the word I was thinking of was abstract.
Abstract.
Oh.
It's an abstracted system.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then when we got to the actual big battle at the end, like it just seemed like we should be the ones to do like the main attack, but then that wasn't like space battling.
Right. Well, yeah. That's why there again, I was able to keep the space combat system away from the table.
Right.
And the Tobantu are going to attack the thing, and we just roll some dice, and boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
And then you guys were basically doing close combat.
Yeah.
Like personal combat.
Yeah.
So.
And it was very satisfying as a player to like when you did that. It felt very cinematic, and it's like when you get into those big battle-y scenes in a movie, and you've got like all of your minor characters or whatever doing the major things, but then you spend the most time on like your hero or heroes in fighting that one person, and it's the intimacy
Yeah.
that is interesting rather than the whole overarching battle. But the overarching battle happening and like how the ship was shaking and like all of that kind of stuff was very atmospheric.
Yeah. I actually don't remember you saying anything about the space combat being weird. So I just like it never occurred just the way the story went is not something I ever wanted thought about doing as a character.
It's not. I don't know if I've never run it. So I've read through it, and it just seems kind of it's abstract, but still kind of fiddly.
Got it.
And that brings up a point. It wasn't the last episode; it was the episode right before it. You said, as we're leaving, your parting shot was like, "Oh, this is a great example of what not to design traps for your characters," because I had no idea that you guys would go and assault the big bad by yourselves. And I'm like, well, of course we are. What would you expect us to do? What did you think we were going to do? Because that statement really caught me off guard. Because to my mind, that's
Those
the only way to be
zombies,
sure is to
Yeah.
get onto that ship and get him and shoot him directly. Because otherwise, we're just killing his minions.
I figured you guys would go down and wreck his cloning facility, and maybe drive your ship into his.
Ooh, suicide missions.
Yeah.
Or not necessarily suicide, but unmanned.
Yeah. We could have programmed it.
But I just wasn't
Right.
sure that would.
Or
Yeah.
poignant ending.
But
for
he had the
Sucrose, too.
nanobats that
Well,
would
yes, he did.
repair his ship, and so it didn't feel like the final solution. I can't ever use that phrase again.
No,
Never
we
mind.
didn't.
But
No,
like,
no.
it didn't feel like a thorough enough solution.
Yeah. Like a guarantee
Right.
win. Like,
No, I get that.
Yeah.
Because, like to all of us, we were like, well, yeah, absolutely, we're going to have to board the ship.
Yeah,
and
we
get
need to
rid of
see
them.
the body.
Yeah, we actually, this
Double
is the only way
tap.
to be sure.
Yeah, says the captain, quote unquote, our military leader.
Of the SS legitimate salvage.
Yeah.
But it does reinforce the advice that we always give, which is come up with the problem, so let the players come up with the solutions.
Yeah.
And you left enough wiggle room in there that we had plenty of options about what we wanted to do. In fact, we pretty much spent an entire episode or figuring out what it is we were going to do and how we were going to do
Session
it.
12 was basically what that was.
Was
yeah.
just planning and plotting because. Again, you didn't really have anything carved in stone. There was no, this is the one way to do it. And so
No.
we were able to, and again, we're kind of shooting in the dark too. We're like, what if this? What if that? What do we, do? And
And that is one thing, I mean, Stu and I were talking one day, where it was like, there isn't one solution to his problems. When you GM, like, you're like, look, if y'all figure out a solution, we'll figure out what the consequences are from it, but there isn't one solution to whatever problem I'm setting up.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something to take away as GMs.
Absolutely.
It's like, don't force your players into a tiny, like,
Yeah.
give them a skeleton key.
it makes it easier for everybody. If there's just, here's the problem, I have no idea how to solve it.
Yeah.
Right.
But here's, here's.
That's probably, I think, why, because that was a very ballsy move. It's like, no, we're going to go on the ship, and we're going to go shoot the thing in the head.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah. We were ballsy.
It was a very adventurous plan,
Yeah.
and I made him pretty tough.
You did, and then, but you also
We just
gave
got
us,
lucky.
you also gave us some outs too. You were like, I remember your Marine said, no, we will be a distraction for you, and we will go up top and pull them out. And we're like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And then, so I feel like once we'd established the
By
plan,
all rights,
you helped.
It probably should have been reversed
Yeah.
in real life.
Right.
We
Yeah.
would have sent the
Right.
special ops team to go kill the guy.
Right.
You guys would have done a distraction. But that's, come on.
That's not nearly as fun
Exactly.
as us fighting, the spider Dalek.
And then how would Riley have gotten the really cool artifact? She
Exactly.
got-
Well, there's shit all over the ship.
I know.
And the ship's still there, yeah. Isn't it? No, the ship was on fire, but we don't know. And we don't,
I think didn't you guys want to launch? You launched
we
it.
launched
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Oh, that's
we
We
right.
launched
Oh,
it.
yeah,
You
that's
launched
right.
it toward the
That's right. We
elliptical
basically
galaxy.
put a
Like, fuck you.
And
quantum
NGC
bomb on it.
3610.
Yes.
I found which
Nice.
elliptical galaxy it was.
Oh, good.
Cool. Nice.
All right, so we're a little over an hour, so
Yeah.
let's end it.
Yeah, well, you said you wanted us to go around and say one thing we learned or something?
Oh, yeah, go.
No. Pooja had her thing.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
damn. On the spot.
Remember, you were like, nobody take my thing, but I'm not going to tell you what it is.
Call
you ever
it out.
I just thought it'd be really funny if, like, I was the last, like
Yeah.
normally am,
okay.
and somebody did take my thing.
Oh.
But, no, I wanted to say that, like, early on, Kimmy's character, Riley, and mine, like, butted heads a lot.
Oh,
And
that's
one
true.
thing that was really great was that Kimmy and I, as players, talked about the relationship and talked about, like, where we were going with it, so that there were no hard feelings. There was no, like, kind of personal aspect to it. We just realized, like, our characters were not gonna.
Right.
And then when we felt it had gone on long enough, like, we had a kind of come to Jesus session.
Yeah. Which worked well because it, like, wasn't planned at all. Like, it
Exactly.
was just like, hey, like, there was, like, after a battle or something, we're like, hey, here's a beer. Oh, thanks. Cool. And then it's just like, all right.
And it was like an evolution of our relationship.
Yeah.
But the basis of that was player communication.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. It was like, I always knew where we stood.
Yeah.
Otherwise, bleed can happen.
Yes.
What happens in games sometimes plays out on real world stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if I really learned anything other than the fact that, well, I learned in myself that I need to make sure that I take Like if I get a power suit, I should probably print out the stats of it so I have it there, or at least force the GM to give me the stats.
Right.
And if I get a magic ship that is full of great stuff, I want to make sure that I know what the story is.
I want a list of that.
I want a list of that stuff, so I don't look like an idiot online going, "Oh, really? Those things were here? Oh. Well, I don't know, what does the suit do?" So that's a failure on me, because I probably could have taken the workload off of Stu because he's a busy guy and come up with the battle suit and said, "This is what my battle suit has," okay? As opposed to, "Does it have this?" Kind of just slows everything down. So I think in the future, when I get cool stuff, I'll just make sure I have a list of what it is. So I'm not fumbling through a bunch of pages in a book trying to figure out what I have.
And cool stuff in Traveler really kind of is character advancement.
Yeah, that's true.
Your equipment really is how you advance if you're a fighty character.
I think what I learned was, because I'm a player who tends to build a lot of my character on my backstory and really dig into that. And I think because this game was a little more loose, and I went in a little more loose with Milo, it really let me have more fun and really kind of explore the character in ways I didn't know how he was going to go. And so that's something I took away from, is maybe be a little looser, like play on the backstory and then forget it, and then bring stuff up if it comes up, but just leave it alone, and then just play with what you have on the table, and then see what your character evolves into.
Nice.
The Traveler's really that way, for sure, because you really don't know what you're going to get. And then, I mean, we all start the first couple of episodes like, I have no idea how to play this character. I have no idea what his motivations are because of all of this stuff. What do we do? You really are flailing for a while. But it is fun. It's like improv.
And I know players who absolutely will not play Traveler because of the fact that it has a random character.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
See, it's
It
my
is.
favorite
It's scary.
Yeah.
It is,
but it's
so
like
much
so great.
I know. Yeah, there's been more than one time where it's like, hey, we're bored. Let's just do travel character creation
Yep.
as a game by itself.
Yeah.
'Cause-
It's kind of like playing Decima.
yeah.
A little bit.
Where's that
Yeah,
available?
I can see that. Oh, yeah. GoldenLassogames.com/Decima, which is officially a DBA now. It's officially a company.
Yay.
So, yay, Golden Lasso Games.
Have you gotten the business tax bill from your city yet?
Well, no, I literally, like, 2 days ago got the
Okay,
thing.
because as soon as they figure out you have a DBA, they start sending you a tax
They do.
bill.
I had to do that previously, so it's going to be, like, it's based on a percentage of your income for this year, so it'll be like,
$2.
Yeah, I spent $300 to get a DBA, so I owe you nothing. But hopefully next year. I think, I learned a whole bunch during this campaign. Kind of like the metagame, which we already touched on, so I feel like metagaming to keep a character in the party, but in a way that's still true to the character was something that I really did, learned a lot about doing in this campaign. But I think the thing I've stolen the most, and my
Legitimate salvage.
yeah, legitimate salvage, sorry, is your trick, Stu, and you've been doing this for as long as I've been playing in your games, but your trick of ending on a cliffhanger, which I have 100% stolen down. I'm using in my Masks campaign. Because you were, at first I thought it was it's for dramatic purpose because it, makes the show good. And then one time during this game, you're like, no, I end on cliffhangers because then I know exactly where the party's going to start next time.
Yep.
I don't have to guess or wait around for you guys to decide at the beginning and then not have something prepared.
Well, we had a session.
Yeah.
You may remember when you guys decided you were going to leave one of the deep space research stations. You had no idea where you were going to go,
Right.
and I even texted or used Slack and do you guys have any idea where you're going to go?
Nope.
Because
Nope.
it's like
Nope.
I kind of want to have something ready, and I have no idea where you're going.
Yeah.
We were all like, no?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
oops.
So that is a thing that I've completely stolen, and my Mask campaign, if they listen to this episode, will be like, God dang it, this is going to happen a lot.
Oh yeah.
Because it made it so much easier because I didn't have to push sometimes at the beginning of a game where there's not that cliffhanger, you have to kind of be like, all right, so it's the next day and you wake up, what do you do? And there's getting that momentum.
Right.
But it's if you're in a cliffhanger and there's a big thing happening right then, there's no getting that momentum going for the next session.
It also
Yeah.
guarantees that players are going to come back. So they're going,
Yeah.
Right.
I called it 6 so I can finish this game. And
Yeah.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my big takeaway from this campaign.
Which I have to say, I've been on pins and needles for 2 weeks.
Have you?
Because
Yeah.
in our Call of Cthulhu game, I rolled 100 on
Yeah.
a roll.
Oh, no.
I saw you do that. You're like, I got 2 zeros. And everybody's like, what?
Yeah.
You were like, oh, wait, I got 2 zeros.
Yeah, and then we were like,
No, that's bad. You want.
yeah.
And that night, I sat down and wrote out what's going to happen.
And that's another thing that's really great about that is because it gives you time to find a really
Yeah.
you're not so in the spot about it. You can think about like what would be the most effective, what most awesome thing to start with next time.
Yeah.
Right. Alrighty.
So you're still on pins and needles because you don't know what's going to happen.
No, Sunday.
Also, no pressure.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to end it.
Okay.
All right.
Oh.
We hope you enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for season 25, episode 16 of Happy Jacks RPG Podcast. My name is Stu,
I'm Pooja.
I'm Stork.
I'm Joey.
And I'm Kimmy.
and we'll see you next Friday at 7:03 Pacific Time, right here at happyjacks.org/live.
Yes.
And then we got Call of Cthulhu
On
Sunday.
Monday. Yep. Then we have
Sunday.
Or Sunday.
Sunday,
Yeah,
Sunday,
Monday.
Sunday.
Monday we've got Insert Coin Floodwater. Go to happyjacks.org/schedule. You see all the stuff that's happening.
Thank you very much. We'll leave with a song.
Yeah.
Oh, Happy Jacks, our patron saint of the skillful game master. Oh, guide us well with yes ending to avert a disaster. Whether fate or GURPS or millions of apocalyptic acts, fellow listeners and every host will always have our backs. Unless you're playing D&D and then they'll give you crap.